Hello, I'm Edna Kane Williams, Executive Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer at AARP. The time you are investing today to take the course, Becoming a More Inclusive Volunteer, is critical to our overall success. At AARP, we are working to uplift the voices and experiences of all people. As an AARP volunteer, we need your help to embed diversity into our advocacy, education, and outreach work. This training and others like it are examples of our commitment to the concepts of diversity, equity, and inclusion for the 50 plus. As we all work to fulfill AARP's mission to empower people to choose how they live as they age, we must remember that AARP's founder, Dr. Ethel Percy Andrus, saw the power of uniting diverse and inclusive voices to advocate for change. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is everyone's responsibility at AARP. Thank you for taking the time to take this training. It will help you grow your skills at becoming a more inclusive volunteer.
Hello, I'm Derek Young, and I want to welcome you to Developmental Delegation. Now, at some level, you may be saying Developmental Delegation, two words I know, but what do they mean together? Well, as an AARP volunteer, I believe your ability to improve how you delegate things is a great way for you to be more inclusive. It's a great way for you to deliver more equity to the people around you. So this notion of developmental delegation is one wherein I believe that if you and I as volunteers will be intentional with how we design the way we delegate things, we can not only help ourselves by freeing up time to do other things, but we'll also actually help that other person achieve some of the goals that he or she may be interested in. Here's where I want to start. Have you ever taught someone how to drive a car? Now, if you haven't, I just want to recommend that you practice your screaming in advance, because I know when I taught my children how to drive, I didn't even know I could scream until I started teaching them to drive. But more seriously, what's the whole purpose of teaching a person to drive? Well, the ultimate goal in teaching someone how to drive is what? That they'll be independent, right? They'll be able to operate a car safely, soundly, on their own, over and over again. The other element to that is, as you teach someone else to drive, it again frees you up to do other things. If you've done it before, let's go back in time a little bit. So how old would you say that person was? Maybe 14, maybe 15 years old, the first time you put them in a car? Now, did you just toss them the keys to a car it took you maybe 10 or 20 years to afford? Well, of course not. They didn't have the experience. They didn't have the know-how. So what did you do? You took the driving experience and you broke it up into small pieces, right? You started by sitting them in the car, explaining what the car is, what the car does, what its power, what its capacity is. You talked to them about the importance of looking out for the other driver. You showed them all the features and functions of the car. Well, guess what? When I say developmental delegation, when you think of the many projects and tasks that you have to do there at AARP, I believe you should use the same mindset when you delegate. So again, back to the car. So you start off and you get that person what? Maybe driving in a very empty parking lot. And a tip for those who've never done it, make sure it's a parking lot with none of those concrete slabs. But you get them in a wide open space where they won't hurt themselves or anyone else. And you talk about every step of the road. Guess what? The same is true when you're delegating tasks to the people you work with at AARP. Now, I'll get into that in a little more detail, but I really want to make sure you get the concept with the driving analogy. Now, after a while, you feel comfortable that that person is able to manage some of the things you've set up for them in the parking lot. So what do you do next? You move to a side street and you get them accustomed to being on that side street. Once they accomplish that, once you feel comfortable with how they handle that, what do you do next? You move them to a busier street, and you get how this goes. In essence, the more comfortable you become with each stage of their growth in driving, you become more comfortable in giving them the freedom to drive. So, what does that mean when it comes to projects and tasks at AARP? What that means is you always maintain the control of how much you give for them to do. But by the same token, you also have the right to pull things back if it isn't going well. You also have the right to give them more if things are going well. So now that that driver that you've been training has proven that they're able to drive on a busy street, now you may have them drive on the interstate. And then ultimately you have them drive maybe to the store by themselves. Well, how does that fit with what you do as a volunteer? When you think of all the things you have going on in your life, AARP obviously is a very important part of your life. So the concept here is we want you to think what I like to call win, win, win. See, by delegating in a way that's developmental for the other person, you win by creating more time for yourself to do other things that relate to AARP and things outside AARP. Secondly, the person wins because, again, they're gaining new knowledge, new skills, new confidence, new opportunities, and you're actually expanding their ability to make a positive impact on AARP. Thirdly, the people that they work with, the people they help, the people they support are gaining yet another champion, another volunteer who's supporting their needs. So again, this concept of developmental delegation is all about you positioning yourself to win, you positioning that other volunteer to win, and then ultimately you and that other volunteer positioning the larger community to win. Now, before I get into some of the steps, I want to give you two very important concepts. The first one is what I like to call style versus standard. You know, when it comes to delegating, most people would say, hey, DY, I'm just afraid to, again, lose control. And I want to sort of correct that. Is it that you're afraid to lose control? I don't think so. I think ultimately what it is you're afraid to lose your opportunity, your position, or your reputation for fear that the other person, won't do it as well as you. They won't meet your standards. So, why the focus on standard and style? This is a simple concept, but watch this. Let's just say you're responsible for putting together a certain document that goes out to members, it goes out to the larger community, all for the sake and the cause of AARP. And you, like me, you like block paragraphs, right? Whatever you write, whatever you send out, you want block paragraphs. Now, is that a standard or is that a style? That's probably more of a style factor. Now, I before E except after C, that's a standard. There are rules of grammar. There are rules of writing that we all have to follow. The point is, I have found that many people, even when they try to delegate something, they let the other person take the wheel, if you will. They let the other person lead on a certain part of a project. They let the other person dictate how a certain task will flow. And then as that person starts to work, as they start to put their best foot forward, the person who's delegating to them says, no, we can't do it that way. Or, no, I don't like that format. Or, no, I don't think that's going to work here. Because they never stop to clarify what the standards are for that project or what the style factors are for that task. So the first concept I want you to get here is with any project or task that you might delegate to another AARP volunteer, please make time to clarify what items in this project or task are standards, things that have to be met. They have to be done in a certain way. We have to follow these rules, procedures, guidelines, or steps. And then again, what aspects of that project or that task are simply just style points, like block paragraphs, or how you introduce something, or maybe even certain words you might use. Here's the second thing. I want to use some words here. This is a bit semantics, but I think you'll see what I mean. For me, you have two options when you're an AARP volunteer and you're thinking about sharing some part of a project or task with another volunteer. You can either delegate or you can dump. When I think of someone dumping something, more often than not, that's a project, that's a task that they just don't want to do. They don't really like it. It doesn't maybe bring them the glory and joy that other things do. So you know what they do? They just dump it on someone else. That's why the title of this session is Developmental Delegation. So as you're thinking about this, maybe you're writing notes, I want you to write this down. When I have a project or task that I believe I can share with another volunteer in some part or in total, how will this project or task help them grow? How will this project or task expand their capacity as an AARP volunteer? And once you can answer that, and once your interaction with them allows them to answer that question, I believe you're on your way to developing a better relationship with that person, because you put the trust in them to say, I believe you can do this project well. And remember, you'll do it differently than I do, but I've already thought that through in explaining to you how this project should run from a standard and style standpoint. Now, let's talk about the steps in the process of developmental delegation. All right, the first step in the process of developmental delegation is for you to identify a project or task that you want to delegate. And in identifying that project or task, what I'm going to ask you to do is to break that project or task up into sort of what we might call bite-sized chunks. How would you lay that project or that task out? And you may think about it over an extended period of time. Hey, I believe this will take 12 months to accomplish, so I'll break it up into quarters, every 3 months at a time. Or you may think about it from the vantage point, I'll think about the major steps in the process. There's forming the team, there's developing the core message and goals, there's creating the action plan for it, there's executing the action plan, and then there's follow-up. So again, you decide how you want to break that project up. But the point is, you're breaking it up, just like we said with driving, so that again, you can determine how that person is doing along the way to decide where you might need to step in or whether you might need to let them do more. So again, the first step is I want you to really think about that project and determine how it can be divided into pieces. Now, the second step in developmental delegation is for you to sit down with the person, or maybe even it's a group, but more often than not, it's going to be a person, to sit down with that person one-to-one and talk through the vision, the goals that are associated with that project or task. And here you want to do two very important things. One, you definitely want to share your vision. You want to share how you view the project. Secondly, you want to get their idea of what the vision for this project should be. You want to get their idea of what the goals should look like. Because once again, once you've divided it into pieces, you're going to be that much better equipped to talk them through the whole project and give them a better sense of how to bring it to a successful conclusion. So that second step is very significant, because in doing that, you're going to hear how they view the various steps along the way. You're going to get a sense of how they might proceed with the action plan. That enables you at the beginning to speak into how they do that project or task, once again, so you can feel more comfortable with giving them the keys to the car. Now, one of the things I found to be very helpful here is to, again, make the comparison or the parallel between this and your goal to be a more inclusive volunteer. Think about it. Think about it. What's more inclusive than saying, I want to help you grow in your experience. I want to offer you an opportunity to do something where your talents and skills will be on display. And I want to share a project or a task with you that, again, is going to help you make a positive impact on AARP. So again, in this instance, developmental delegation is one of the greatest ways for you to be more inclusive. So when it comes to developmental delegation, this is a process that I found working with thousands of people all over the country, that once you start trying it, it'll become natural. And obviously, once it becomes natural, it'll be easier for you to even get better at how you delegate. So that leads us to step 3. Now, step 3 is literally, and we're going to stick with the driving analogy, where the rubber meets the road. Because step 3 is where you, as the AARP volunteer, this is where you ask that other person to create the action plan that they want to use, that they want to follow to complete this project or task. And once again, this is your opportunity to let them drive the car to the store and you not be in the passenger seat. This is your opportunity to let them take the car on a long road trip and you not be a part of it. The key here, though, is again, you're letting them create the action plan, but you are having a conversation with them about how they want to carry it out so that you still have a way to say, let's try this, or what do you think about that? Once again, in this process of helping you to be a more inclusive volunteer, the whole goal here is you're available to offer support. And if you haven't learned this, you will. When we talk about equity, see, for me, equity is your ability to give each fellow volunteer the knowledge, the skills, the support, the relationships, whatever they uniquely need to have success with what they're doing. So in this instance, if you allow that person to walk you through their view of how that project ought to go, their view of how that task ought to be completed, it gives you that great upfront opportunity to have a real clear understanding of what should be expected so that once they drive off in the car, you're going to be that much more comfortable. They're going to be that much more comfortable, and both of you will be on the same page. So that step 3, that's the big one. That's where we really find out your readiness to let go, if you will. All right? Now, step 4. Step 4 is, in essence, this is where you and the other person review the progress of that project. Review the progress on that task. This is that time where maybe it's a week later or a month later, but somewhere down the road from the date you initially set up to create the action plan, this is where you simply say, how's it going? Are you achieving the things you plan to achieve? Are things falling in line the way you wanted them to fall in line? This is again where you are in the mode of delivering equity. As we said in multiple of the training sessions that you either have attended or will attend, equity is very action oriented. That's how we want you to think about it. But by the same token, you sort of wait to hear and see what that person might uniquely need. Because let's face it, if the person is doing a great job, if the project or task is going well, you may not need to deliver any kind of equity. They may not need any sort of support from you, which again, ultimately is what the goal is. Because as we said at the outset, see, the goal here is for you to have more time to focus on other things that matter, while that person is gaining all this positive growth, positive information, positive experiences in the process of carrying out the project. Now again, when I say positive, that doesn't mean they won't have bumps in the road, because for me, learning how to deal with those bumps in the road, that's positive. We hope when we send someone out to drive a car, they never have a fender bender. We pray they never get into an accident. But sometimes accidents do happen. So if the accident happens, that's a time for you to, again, talk with the person and say, hey, what happened here? Did they cut you off? Were you driving too fast? And it creates what? A learning experience for that driver. So the same is true in this 4th step of the process of developmental delegation. This is that time when you're looking for, are there any things that I can provide to help this person operate better on this project or task? Or as I said before, is this person rolling along so well that all I need to do is just give them the thumbs up and just continue to check on them throughout the process? So again, this 4th step is key, because this is where you are now really moving into a true delegator. Because again, Sometimes there will be slip-ups. Sometimes there will be things that may not go right. But your job is not to automatically what? Give me the wheel, I'll drive. No, your job is to coach, to support. Remember, to deliver equity. All right, so we've gone through step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. What's step 5? Step 5, and I want you to write this down. Step 5 is to celebrate the success. Now you may say, wait a minute, DY, what if they don't achieve the goal? Here's what I want you to take away from this session today. The larger goal is the development the person gained in the process. Yes, do you want the project to land well? Of course you do. Do they want the project to land well? Certainly. But the bigger issue here is, how has that person grown as an AARP volunteer? Do they have new relationships in the community? Do they have broader, deeper perspectives on the people that they work for and work with? Have they gained new insight about themselves, how they come off to other people, how they're being perceived? You see, the whole goal here is to develop the person. Now, here's a leadership philosophy that I have used for many years, and I want to share it with you. For me, leadership is all about using the work to develop the person. I'll say that again. Leadership is about using the work to develop the person. Now, I know if you're an AARP volunteer and you've gone through all 5 training sessions for becoming a more inclusive volunteer, and you are now going through the video series that supports that training, I know you are a get it done, no nonsense, let's make something positive happen type person. And I love you for that. At the same time, what I want to suggest to you here is that ultimately, the people you work with, the relationships you have at AARP, for me, that's the ultimate goal. That's the ultimate gold. Obviously, yes, we want every project to be awesome. We want every task to be awesome, but you and I both know that sometimes that might not be realistic. So the point here is you celebrate the success of what the person has learned and gained throughout this project or task. And you also hope to celebrate a great outcome, a great ending. So again, that's a step that way too many volunteers, I believe, overlook, because sometimes we get so bombarded with the first task and the next thing and the next project and the next activity. We never take time to celebrate the accomplishment, and we hardly ever take time to celebrate the personal victories that person gained based on what they learned. So again, that step is very significant. Now, what's the last step in developmental delegation? Well, as you kind of look at how we've gone on throughout this, the last step is to take some time and evaluate the entire process. Both the learning that was experienced by that volunteer and the outcome of the project or task. You want to really sit back as an AARP volunteer and spend some time thinking about what worked here, what didn't work, what could I do differently the next time I delegate something to someone, what could I do differently in designing a project or breaking down a project like we did in an earlier step. You see, taking that time to evaluate how the person did, how the person responded, how the person grew through the process, and taking time to determine how this project actually landed is all about preparing you to be what? An even better volunteer. Preparing you to be even better at how you include people and how you deliver equity to them. And it's also clearly about how you get better at ensuring that the people that you're delegating things to come out on the positive side. Because once again, they've grown, and again, like we said, hopefully the project was a success. So again, as we close up developmental delegation, what I want to say to you is this for me, and again, this is nearly 40 years I've been doing this. This for me is one of the most powerful concepts you can gain as an AARP volunteer. I believe as you think about it, as you put it in place, as you try it, as you continue to try it over and over again with the different people you work with in your city, in your town, in your state, I promise you, you'll find that once again, it is a win-win-win proposition. You win by gaining more time, by gaining more opportunities to do other things. The individual wins because, again, they feel included. They feel like they belong because you put such trust in them and you've given them that directed, specific support they need in an equitable way. And then ultimately, the AAR people in your community, they win. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you on the next video.